Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Bongi and thank you so much for tuning into True Crime with Bongi. So today we're going to be talking about the case of the Shoelace killer. You guys probably have already heard of it, but if you haven't, you're in for a shock. It's going to be a bumpy ride. So in this case, we're going to be talking about a repeat offender. We're going to be talking about two crimes basically. So yeah, it might be a long one. I don't know though. I'm not sure. I don't think it's gonna be long. But anyways, before I get into it, you guys already know that I have to make my disclaimer that I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody that I'm going to be talking about in this video and all the families that were and are affected by this case. This video is purely for educational purposes and all the information was gotten off the internet and simply compiled into one video. I also wanna notify you guys ahead of time that this case does involve the death of two minors. So if that's something that's that triggers you, then feel free to click out of the video. I'm pretty sure that I'll see you again in another video that's a little bit suitable for you. With that being said, let's just get right into the case. On the night of the 28th of February 2003, 18-year-old Wesley Julyan and his 21-year-old friend Yaku Strauss decided to go out to a couple of bars and clubs. They were bar hopping in Mtwalume, which is right outside Durban in KZN, and with each bar that they went to, of course, they were drinking and also smoking, and there's also allegations that they also took some ecstasy, but I don't really know. At around midnight, as they were driving around, their car broke down and the pair decided to go to a nearby petrol station to ask for some help. While there, they met 51-year-old Kenneth Van Aart, who was at the petrol station to get a couple of stuff from the convenience store. So they approached Kenneth, told him their story, and asked him for a ride to Wesley's home in Mtwalume, where he lived with both his parents and two of his siblings, an older brother and a sister. And Kenneth agreed to give them a ride, so they all hopped into his car. At some point during the drive, they all decided to make a quick stop at Mtwalume Social Club for a couple of drinks. And at around 2 a.m. they left the club and headed back to the car. At this point, they claimed that Kenneth was really drunk, so they even had to assist him to, help him get back to the car. They put Kenneth on the passenger seat and Yaku Strauss got on the driver's seat while Wesley Julyan was at the back, in the back. According to Yaku Strauss, while they were driving to Wesley's home, Wesley told him that he was going to strangle Kenneth, and then he immediately put his hands around Kenneth's neck. This shocked him, this startled him, so he stopped the car on the side of the road and got out of the car and started pacing up and down. At some point, Wesley called out to Yaku and told him to hand him his shoelaces because strangling Kenneth with his hands was too difficult. He handed Wesley his shoelaces, which he then used to strangle Kenneth Van Aart to death. And then Yaku got back into the car and they continued with the drive to Wesley's home. They decided to dispose of the body in an open plot of land somewhere near Wesley's home. Now, Wesley's home was on a big plot of land, and even though they were on his parents' property, they were not near the house. Wesley went inside the house, and when he came out, he had a roll of tape with him, which he then used to wrap around Kenneth's head, covering his entire face. They then covered his body with some branches and leaves and then headed to Durban, where they attempted to sell Kenneth's car but failed. At around 6 a.m. they went back to Wesley's home and then they slept. Later on that day, they went back to Durban to try and sell the car again, and when they failed, they decided to wipe off their fingerprints on the car and then abandoned the car. From there, they went back to the body and then decided to bury it to avoid, the smell of decomposition alarming anybody that there's a dead body on the premises. They dug a shallow grave and then they pushed Kenneth's body inside. While they were pushing him inside, 70 rands fell out of his pocket, and then Wesley took 50 bucks for himself and then handed Yaku the 20 bucks. So when Kenneth didn't make it back home that night, his wife Sharon became alarmed and then he reported him missing on the 1st of March 2003. Although the police did find his car, there were no clues regarding his whereabouts on the car, and for the next 68 days, there would be nothing regarding Kenneth's whereabouts. A few months before the murder, Yaku's friend's wife had came to visit South Africa from the UK, and while she was in South Africa, she and Yaku had an affair which lasted throughout the entire holidays. They also continued talking even when she went back to the UK. After the murder took place between the 1st of March and the 3rd of March, Yaku sent her a bunch of messages confessing to the murder. The messages were in great details. So these messages scared her, and she ended up reporting these messages to the police in the UK. The police in the UK then contacted Interpol, which then contacted the South African police. Yaku Strauss was then located and arrested, and Wesley was then arrested shortly thereafter. Wesley's story didn't match Yaku's story though. According to him, Yaku was the orchestrator of this entire thing. He said that while they were driving, Yaku told him that if he wanted to make a quick 10,000 bucks, then he had to listen to everything that he said and basically comply to, follow his instructions basically. He said that all he did was restrain Kenneth while Yaku strangled him, and that later on Yaku was the one who told him to even stamp on Kenneth's grave so that the grave doesn't look too obvious. Yaku had gotten a plea deal from the prosecutors, and he decided to testify against Wesley Julyan. And in 2004, Yaku Strauss was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Wesley Julyan was sentenced to 13 years. During his psychological evaluation, he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, but due to his age, the psychologist said that he could be rehabilitated, so he got 13 years. But the family was not happy about the sentence, and so they appealed it, and Wesley's sentence was increased from 13 years to 20 years imprisonment. But even though his sentence was increased, in 2009, after serving just 5 years of his sentence, Wesley was released on parole. Yaku was also released the following year in 2010, and he claimed that he had given his life to Jesus. For the next 8 years, Wesley lived a normal life. He was pretty much out of trouble, and nobody heard anything about or from Wesley Julyan. But in 2017, tragedy struck again, but this time it was quite close to home for Wesley. Sometime between 2009 and 2017, Wesley lost his mother, and in 2017 his father decided to sell the house and the property in Mtwalume. Wesley was staying at the family home at the time, as the sale was still in progress. His sister was living elsewhere, and his brother was also living elsewhere with his wife Leanne, his 9-year-old son Ethan, his 16-year-old stepdaughter Kayla, and his father-in-law Peter. On the 19th of December 2017, Wesley realized that there were some items or pieces of furniture that were missing from the family home. He called Jeffrey and asked him about the missing items, and Jeffrey told him that those items were in his possession. They had an argument over the phone, and Jeffrey just decided that, okay, he'll bring the items back to Wesley. Because it was during the school holidays, he decided to take his 9-year-old son, 16-year-old stepdaughter, and his father-in-law with him to Wesley's home, to the home in Mtwalume. His wife was still at work, so he couldn't take her with him, but he did have to fetch the wife from work later on that day. When he didn't arrive to fetch his wife, Leanne says that she just knew at that moment that something was wrong. She called him, but his phone went unanswered, and she also called her father. Same story, the phone went unanswered. She also called her 16-year-old daughter, but her phone was also the call was going unanswered. This was weird for Leanne because her husband was a very punctual person, and he also always answered his phone. But anyway, she managed to make it back home, but what was weird was that the house was empty, so she started panicking. Less than 2 hours later, she received a call, and this person on the call was informing her that her parents-in-law's house in Mtwalume was on fire. So she immediately dropped everything and rushed to Mtwalume. Neighbors saw smoke at the house at around 7 p.m. and they gathered around to try and put out the fire. When they got there, they saw a struggling Wesley Julyan. You know, he was coughing. It seemed like he had just gotten out of the house. He was coughing, so that's the impression that they got. When the fire department got there, it was unfortunately too late. 4 bodies were discovered in one bedroom in the house. Leanne was told that her entire family was asleep when the fire started, but this made absolutely no sense to her because number one, they didn't live there, and secondly, Jeffrey was supposed to fetch her from work that day, and he didn't say anything to her about, you know, not being able to come to pick her up. So the investigators continued to talk to her because she was confused and she had all these questions. They continued to talk to her while awaiting the results from the postmortem. And when the results came out, the police discovered that the family was actually not asleep when the fire started. They had been strangled to death before the fire was even started. So the police put the picture together. They went out to question the neighbors who were at the scene, and the neighbors who arrived there first said that Wesley was acting strange. They said that Wesley didn't really help to try and put out the fire, and whenever they asked him if there was anybody inside the house, he didn't really give them an answer. He acted like he didn't know if there was anyone inside. By this time, Wesley was still at the hospital getting treated for smoke inhalation, but when he was discharged the following morning, the police immediately took him in for some questioning. Wesley denied having any knowledge about what started the fire. He actually claimed that he was not at the house, and when he came back, he found it on fire. So he ran inside, but he got overcome by the smoke, and that's when he ran outside. He also claimed that he had absolutely no idea that the family was still inside the house. So after hearing his story, the police released him, and after the funeral, Wesley moved to Plattenberg Bay to live with his father. However, the investigation was still in progress. It was still continuing. Cell phone records showed that Wesley was actually at the home the entire time, and at the time that he claimed that he was overcome by the smoke and he ran outside, he was actually on his phone texting his girlfriend in the United States, telling her that his home was on fire. So because of this, the police just knew that Wesley Julyan was responsible for the deaths of his 4 family members. They put together a timeline of events. It seems as though Wesley's argument with Jeffrey continued at the house, as Jeffrey was the first one to be attacked. As the argument continued and escalated and just kept escalating, Wesley hit Jeffrey with an axe on the head and then continued to strangle him with a rope. Peter was also strangled, but with a ligature made from copper wire. And 16-year-old Kayla was strangled with a dog collar and some green rope, while 9-year-old Ethan was strangled with an unidentified ligature. He then took each of them and put them in the bedroom, doused the house in petrol, and set it alight. So after the police put together this timeline of events, Wesley Julyan was arrested at his father's house in Plattenberg Bay, and he was charged with 4 counts of murder. He pleaded not guilty to all of his charges. He was taken to a psychological evaluation where he was then deemed fit to stand trial. The trial began in 2018, and the state's case was basically what I mentioned earlier on, but I'll touch down a little bit on it again. So basically they said that Wesley had an argument with his brother regarding the missing furniture, and even though his brother had agreed to return the furniture, the argument continued when they got there. It got too heated and Wesley ended up hitting him on the head with the axe and then strangling him. Once Jeffrey had died, Wesley realized that he had to kill each and every one of his family members, and so he did just that, starting with the strongest and ending up with the weakest. And that's why he started with Peter, then went down to 16-year-old Kayla, and then ended with Ethan. He then moved them to the bedroom and then set the house alight. Wesley's testimony, Wesley's story, was that they did have an argument the day before, but on the day of the murders, him and his brother had already settled their differences and they weren't arguing anymore. When the state asked him why he had Jeffrey's company car keys in his possession, he said that Jeffrey had given them to him, and this really contradicted what he had said to the police earlier on, because he had said that he had absolutely no idea that his family was still in the house. But Maji, if you had their car keys, where else would they go? You know, if you knew they were there in the house and Jeffrey gave you the car keys, he obviously couldn't take his family anyway. They were definitely still in the house. But anyways, the state then said that it seemed as though Wesley actually took the car keys, and as he stepped outside, he was on his way to flee using Jeffrey's company car, but the neighbors showed up and they completely ruined his plan. It also turns out that Wesley's girlfriend in the United States had actually called him right before the neighbors saw the flames or the smoke, and the call went unanswered, and that's why immediately after stepping outside, he texted his girlfriend. Even though the state's case was mainly circumstantial, the circumstantial evidence was simply too compelling. It was one of those cases where the circumstantial evidence kind of points to the same person. Like, everything was literally pointing towards Wesley. Like, first of all, Wesley was the one who lived there, so he would have known if somebody was in the house, you know. And secondly, he had the car keys in his possession. Bro, there was no way that anybody was gonna go anywhere without those car keys. If they were with you, then you definitely knew that they were in the house. So it made absolutely no sense for you to say that you have no idea that there's people inside the house when the neighbors were asking you if there were people inside, and also when the police asked you if you knew that your family was still inside the house. And also, like, just everything was just pointing towards him, everything. And that is why in February of 2019, Wesley Julyan was found guilty of all 4 murders, and he was handed down 4 life sentences plus an additional 5 years for the arson. Can we just think about Leanne for a minute? Imagine having your entire family completely wiped out just a few days before Christmas. Imagine that. Like, I'm thinking about her, and honestly my heart goes out to her. I hope she finds the peace. I hope she heals from the loss of her family members. And also, you guys should let me know what it is that you think about this case. Do you think that the circumstantial evidence could have been, you know, somehow it could have pointed elsewhere? Do you think that there was no way that Wesley could have killed all 4 people without even a single person running outside to get some help, or a single person surviving somehow? Or I don't know, do you guys think it was possible for him to kill all 4 people in one day, in just a couple of hours? Probably. Let me know what you think in the comment section. But that brings us to the end of today's video. This is us concluding the case. Thank you so much for watching this video till this point. Even if you didn't reach this point, I'm still very thankful for everyone that watched. Please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video or found it informative, and also leave your case suggestions in the comment section down below, and all your thoughts in the comment section down below. I always read those, so yeah. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and also turn on your post notifications and watch my other videos, you know. And with that being said, that's it from me to you guys. I'll see you guys next week Wednesday with another case video, and yeah, bye.